Once again, good afternoon, and thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. My name is Elliot Dooms, and I am the Regional Administrator for the General Services Administration in the National Capital Region. I'd like to formally welcome you to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center. We are thrilled you could join us today as we share some exciting news with all of you. Today's program will begin with remarks from USAID Deputy Director Paloma Adams-Allen, followed by GSA's Administrator Robin Carnahan, Senior Advisor to the President for Clean Energy Innovation and Implementation, John Podesta, and the Chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory. After the conclusion of the remarks, our speakers will be open to answer questions during our press conference portion of the event that will take place in the rear of the room. Please hold all questions until then. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce USAID Deputy Director Paloma Adams-Allen.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you all join us here today at the Ronald Reagan Building, home to the headquarters of the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, as well as a host of other government agencies and private sector entities. I'm honored to join our partners from the General Services Administration, the White House, and the private sector to mark this historic milestone, an investment made possible by the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to tackling the climate crisis. Following President Biden's executive order, addressing climate change at the center of our domestic national security and foreign policy, USAID jumped into action. On Earth Day, April 2022, we launched an ambitious new climate strategy that guides our work with countries and communities overseas. In the first year of the strategy, USAID has increased its climate investments, and we're tackling the climate crisis in more countries than ever. But we know we also need to walk the walk in terms of how we do business here. That's why our climate strategy also commits USAID to transforming the agency's operations so as to minimize our contributions to climate change. This includes working to reduce emissions from our facilities, our vehicle fleets, our business travel, our acquisition and assistance processes, our supply chains, our utility consumption, waste management, and information technology processes. In fact, by 2030, USAID aims to achieve a 65% decrease in our emissions down from our 2008 baseline. And together with the rest of the federal government, we're striving to achieve net zero emissions in operations by 2050. We're already making strides. For example, the USAID-led President's Malaria Initiative has begun using sea and land freight to ship life-saving supplies to partner countries, reducing the program's carbon emissions by half since 2019. However, we know we can't achieve our goals alone. Our progress depends on partnerships, such as with GSA, from which we lease our facilities here in the United States, with the Department of State, with whom we are located in embassies overseas, and with our partners globally. Addressing the climate crisis head-on is a tremendous undertaking. No one community, state, country, or government agency can do it alone. The clean energy transition of the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center, which you'll hear more about momentarily, is a strong example of how the US government is leading on and modeling effective partnerships for sustainability. And now, to speak more about this effort, it is my honor to welcome GSA Administrator Robin Carnahan.
Well, welcome everyone. It's so good to be with you, Elliot, Mona, thank you so much. And John Podesta joining us from the White House. You've been a great partner, and Brenda Mallory at CEQ. Thank you so much for your leadership on all of this. Also happy to be here with our colleagues from Johnson Controls. Can you all wave? Yes, thank you all very much for what you're doing. We'll talk more about that. The Biden administration, as you know, has big goals for tackling the climate crisis and at the same time investing in America. That's why the historic Inflation Reduction Act is so important, because it positions the government to really lead by example and move our country toward a clean energy economy. We're catalyzing investments in communities all across the country to do three things. I call it a triple win. Create good jobs and innovation in America. 2, reduce costs by reducing energy consumption. And 3, improving the health of our planet for our kids. We are making big progress on all three of these. Let me just give you a couple examples. At GSA already, we've reduced greenhouse gas emissions in our federal footprint in buildings by more than half. Listen to this. It's a decade ahead of schedule. We're proud of that. But that's not all. We've also managed to save money at the same time and save taxpayers $638 million by making those smart investments. It's our plan to do more of that. In Texas and Louisiana, we're investing in energy efficiency upgrades. In northern Oklahoma, we're electrifying buildings. In Oklahoma City, we just launched one of our first grid interactive efficient buildings. It's going to be a model for the rest of the country. In DC, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're investing in deep energy retrofits. All of these things are good for jobs, they're good for taxpayers, and they're good for the environment. But today, here in this building, we are taking one of our biggest steps yet toward a clean energy future. We're announcing the investment of $975 million from the IRA to deploy emerging and sustainable technologies all across the federal footprint. You can clap at that. This is a good thing. But there is even better news. Of that $975 million is going to unlock even more, $1.9 billion, because we're partnering with the private sector through energy savings performance contracts that's going to bump up that total. And all told, that's going to be focused on improving buildings and making them run clean. Now, these upgrades we expect to impact and have 28 new fully net zero buildings and 100 new all-electric buildings across the country. What that means in the context of our entire portfolio is we have about 130 million square feet that's now going to be sustainable, and that's about 2/3 of our entire building portfolio, which is the biggest in the country. So I think to myself, what better place to start than one of the biggest buildings here in Washington? And so I'm very pleased to announce that this Reagan Federal Building is going to be all electric with the help of our partners from Johnson Controls and the investments from the Inflation Reduction Act. So bravo team for getting that done. When all is said and done, we're going to leverage $13.5 million in IRA funds that's going to support over $90 million in investments here. That's an 8-to-1 leverage of our money. And so I say that is a pretty smart for taxpayers. It's going to enable us to make some very big changes. We just got to look at some of them downstairs. There are 57,000 new LED lights, 500 high efficiency transformers, and we're also doing a reverse osmosis groundwater recovery, which is a lot of words, but basically it means, you know, Washington is built on a swamp. There's a lot of water down there in the aquifer. We're going to be using that water that otherwise might come into the building in ways we don't want it to actually help with the heating and cooling systems. Now listen to these estimates. We're going to reduce energy consumption in this facility alone by 40%. We're going to cut emissions by 16,000 tons, saving 35 million gallons of water every year, which also is cost, and all-in cost savings of $6 million a year. I say that's a pretty smart investment for the American people. Now, what this looks like is when the government puts its buying power to use, where we decide we're going to transform our footprint, and in doing so, help transform the marketplace and move towards sustainability. It's a thing that can help with billions of dollars in new construction materials. We also have our federal buildings as test beds for new technology, and we're accelerating the market for all of this clean energy innovation. It's projects like these that are smart ways to invest in America. It revitalizes manufacturing, it supports workers, it bolsters our resilience, it reduces pollution, it helps our national security, and it helps build an economy that works for everyone. So our job at GSA is to show what's possible. That's what we're doing with this building, and we want to have more folks come along with us for the ride. Obviously, though, we can't do it alone. We've got a lot of partners in this, folks that are in this room and private sector and also public. Just a couple of weeks ago, we talked also about how we're quadrupling our investments in a thing called the Green Proving Ground, which is innovative and new companies that can test their products in buildings. We're going from 5 companies normally every year that use it to 20. It's a big escalation, and we're excited about that. We're also have announced deep energy retrofits in 41 facilities across the country. So these kind of partnerships are what's going to get us to net zero by 2045. Now, I know we have some industry folks in the room. Here's my ask to all of you. The first is, please, please, please learn about all the things GSA is doing. We want to be on the front lines of this, and we know we can't get it done without you. So Johnson Controls, you're setting a good model here, but we need other companies to step up in other parts of the country and partner with us. Second, really would like you to reach out to the innovators in your networks, the companies and the entrepreneurs who have new products. We would like to be test beds for those, so please send them our way in the Green Proving Ground. And the third is, please respond to calls when we ask for information from you and from the marketplace. I know it can be a pain, but it makes a real difference because it helps inform the policy that we can then go out and execute across the country. So I will tell you, I have been around long enough to know that we are living in a very unusual moment where we have momentum and money at the same time to do really important things. And I know that the innovators here in America will rise to this challenge and be great partners with us and help us meet the president's very ambitious goals of net zero buildings and net zero footprint for our country. As he reminds us all the time, the president loves to say, there's nothing we cannot achieve when we work together. I think this is a perfect example of that. It's a triple win for jobs and innovation, for cost savings for taxpayers, and for the health of our planet. So I'm super proud to be part of that. And John Podesta, thank you so much for being a guide along the way for all of this and an advocate at every step. So please come talk to us a little bit.
Thanks so much, Administrator Carnahan. She said you have 2 things. You have a third thing, which is vision. So thanks for being 10 years ahead of schedule and for your leadership at GSA. It's great to be here with Chair Mallory, with GSA Regional Administrator Dooms, and with Administrator Adams Allen, with members of the city government, and with Johnson Controls and all of you. Thanks for all of you for being here to celebrate an historic day for GSA, for our entire administration, and I dare say for the planet. When President Biden took office, he brought a vision to tackle the climate crisis by investing in our economy, by building things in America again, being a global leader on innovation, and creating good-paying, high-quality jobs. That vision turned into President Biden's Investing in America agenda, including the Inflation Reduction Act, along with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act. These are the most significant investments, and the IRA alone is the most significant investment in our country's history in clean energy and climate, and probably the biggest investment ever in the world. This historic legislation is sweeping. It covers clean power, clean transportation, clean industry, climate-smart agriculture, and relevant to today, clean buildings. It does that by enacting 10 years of policy certainty for clean energy through game-changing tax credits. That's already spurred more than $111 billion of announced investments by the private sector in clean energy since the bill's passage, more than 250 since the president and vice president entered office in 2021. The Inflation Reduction Act makes catalytic investments in communities, especially underserved and overburdened communities, so that they can build their own clean energy future. And it helps the federal government lead by example by slashing emissions, particularly from federal buildings. Investing in upgrades in our federal government buildings, from heat pumps to high-density insulation, is frankly a no-brainer as the administrator noted. We're saving money for taxpayers. We're helping reduce emissions. It improves the health and comfort of the people who work in those buildings and the communities who live around them. And it's helping to tackle the climate crisis by cutting down the roughly 1/3 of U.S. emissions that come from buildings. It creates good paying jobs, and all of these help by what we saw in the machine room downstairs. Today's announcement puts the soon to be electrified Ronald Reagan building as a shining example of what can be accomplished in buildings across America. If a big, beautiful, multi-purpose building like this can go electric, any building can. With the full $975 million from the IRA, more than 100 federal sites will follow this building's leads by going all electric or net zero. More than 100 chances to show American leadership on climate and clean energy innovation while benefiting the communities around them, and more than 100 ways to build a cleaner, safer, better future, leading by example. So congratulations to GSA, to Johnson Controls, to USAID, and to everyone who works in this building. And now I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory.
I love going at the end of a long list like this because they've said everything there is to say. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and to see everyone here and the excitement around this particular project. One of my great privileges is to have the chance to be at these events where we can actually see on the ground what it is that the president's agenda is accomplishing. And so I'm grateful to be joined with my partners here and to say just a few more words about the president's sustainability agenda overall. I think one thing that we are very fortunate to have is to have Administrator Carnahan as the head of her organization, because she is really pushing the envelope on all of these issues in ways that meet the moment. We know, and she's got a fan club. So I'm grateful that she calls me up from time to time and says, hey, do you want to go here and look in the basement of some building? And of course I do, because that's where the action is. President Biden really set for us a high federal sustainability bar, and this announcement today just really brings us another step closer to his overall goals. Electrifying buildings means cleaner air, good paying jobs, and more resilient communities. And so many of the critically important issues that we're addressing in the Biden-Harris administration are about achieving a future that includes those things. Over the past 2 years, President Biden has made unprecedented investments in climate resilience, sustainability, and building our nation's clean energy future. The president's Investing in America agenda is all about those elements because we recognize at the moment we are in now, this crisis has to be addressed with all of us working together under that type of a vision, and continuing the federal government's focus on how we lead by example. Our administration committed not only to leading by example in tracking climate change, but using our buying power and real estate footprint to move markets, create demand, and catalyze on clean energy innovation. As our nation's largest building owner and manager, the federal government's leadership has the power to set the bar for more sustainable buildings across the nation. And we're seeing the private sector step up and want to be partners, and that's really exciting. So I also give a nod out to our friends at Johnson Controls for the work that they're doing. My office is charged with implementing President Biden's federal sustainability plan and the December 2021 federal sustainability executive order. This set a goal to reach net zero emissions from the US government by 2050. To get there, we are working to electrify and power our 300,000 plus federal buildings with 100% carbon-free electricity, electrify our federal fleet of 600,000 cars and trucks, and ensure that the $630 billion worth of goods and services we buy every year has a lower carbon footprint. Meeting the challenge of climate change requires new approaches and unprecedented levels of collaboration. And I just want to thank everyone who helped make today's announcement possible. It's great to see the efficiency and electrification work that is already underway here in the Ronald Reagan Building. This is a major achievement for electrification, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. And we certainly are excited about the other possibilities that we're already talking about that will come in the future. So with your partnership, with your support, I think we are going to meet the president's overall goals and help the American people tackle this crisis. So thank you so much for being here today.
All right. I'd just like to thank you all for attending the announcement of this very exciting news. For those of you who are part of UNESCO or members of the Federal Performance Contracting community, we invite you to stay for a special purpose meeting starting at 2:30 to discuss performance contracting. For all others, we invite you to continue your conversations in the lobby outside the pavilion. Thank you for joining us today.